I don't worry about it. You know, I understand where everyone's coming from. I understand where I'm at in my career. But I also, believe in compartmentalizing things and focusing on, what's in front of us this week and the job that I have to do. We've got 11 ball games to go in this season, and we've got to find a way to get some wins and get back in the mix. And that's where our mindset has to be at. It has to be different, from what everybody else is kind of talking about right now as players. We can't control that. All we can control is our preparation and our performances, week in and week out.
Matt Ryan talking about his future with the Falcons, a future that was thrown into doubt earlier this week when Coach Dan Quinn, GM Thomas Dimitroff both fired, and the next day Arthur Blank saying it's going to be up to the next regime as to whether or not Matt Ryan stays. That's not my decision. Look, Peter, from a cap standpoint, I think their hands are tied for 2021. $44 million if you cut or trade Matt Ryan. That hits the cap. Now, the only argument that it doesn't matter is that he's got a $40 million cap number if you keep him. So you're only talking about a net cap charge of $4 million, and you save $23 million if you move him off the roster. But, again, it's all going to come down to what the new coach and the new GM want to do. And a lot of times the new coach and the new GM want that redshirt year where they get to give the current quarterback a test drive and then move to their own guy in the second year of the new regime.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite unlikely that they move on from Matt Ryan next year. But I'll tell you, it's very, very strange to look at the Atlanta Falcons and to look at two of their last three games and have 0 touchdown passes in 2 of the last 3 games. That's just incredibly un-Falcon. And so, obviously they've got to get better. But I do think the one other thing that you consider when you talk about Matt Ryan is that he basically he's the leader of this team on and off the field. And I don't think you want to make all of these revolutionary moves in one fell swoop. I think Matt Ryan comes back in 2021 and he basically plays for his future, with whoever the new coach is. That's my gut feeling. I think it's the same as yours.
Yeah, I think that's right. They are going to have to do something about that cap number, though, of $40 million. We're now getting to the point where these guys who have gotten the huge contracts are getting into the years of the contracts because they set it up so the cap charge early isn't all that dire. They push it out to the future years, and they always assume by the time we get to that really big number, we'll work something out. We'll do a restructuring. We'll kick the can. We'll extend the deal, whatever. If you're dealing with a new regime that may be a little ambivalent, well, maybe Matt's a little ambivalent. One of the things Arthur Blank said, it's going to be up to the player too. And, if a franchise quarterback doesn't want to be with the franchise anymore, it makes it hard to go forward. And they're going to have some decisions to make, and they're going to have some work to do to try to get that cap number under control. And if Matt Ryan is staying, he would presumably have an incentive to get the cap number under control, or he's not going to have a very good team around him. But some big decisions that they have to make. As we mentioned earlier, the facility of the Atlanta Falcons was closed on Thursday. The Sunday game against the Vikings is still on. At one point yesterday, there was a report that the Falcons could have actually gone in to work yesterday afternoon, and they chose not to. I guess they just looked and said, we're 0-5. What the hell? What difference? What does it you think it's going to help us win this weekend? Although, who knows? The interim head coach thing sometimes gives you a little bit of a bump. But this Falcons team, Peter, I don't know. It's just for a team that finished 6-2 last year, just like the Jets. Jets and Falcons finished 6-2 last year. Hey, keep an eye on them for 2020, and they're a combined 0-10 now.
Mike, look, if you were the Atlanta Falcons, and I understand that Raheem Morris is looking at this as, the same way Greg Williams looked at it when he took over the Browns with whatever 8 or 9 games left to go. Hey, look, this is my chance. We are going to go, we're going to go all out to try to win every game that we can. So I get that. But I also think that one of the reasons you do this when you do it, and there's no question why I think both teams, who've made coaching changes now early have done this. They basically said, look, we want all the time we can to look at the field of coaching candidates. We want to make sure that we are not basically just spending 3 days, 24-hour days for 3 days trying to figure out who we want to interview and how we're going to get in line. Like, look at what the Carolina Panthers did with Matt Rule. They had researched Matt Rule. And Mike, it was to the point where they called Matt Rule when he was on vacation with his family and said, basically, we want to be first in line. We'll interview you right when you land from the airport. And that's what they did. By the time the Giants even woke up the next morning, they wanted a shot at Matt Rule. He had a plane ticket to New York that morning. He had already had his agreement, with the Carolina Panthers. So, that is what I think this extra time does. It gives you time to get your ducks in a row for your coaching search, and what your record is the rest of the year. It matters to Raheem Morrison. Good. He's going to be really motivated to put a great product on the field. But the rest of the organization is going to have half an eye on that and the other eye, or one eye on that and the other eye on, hey, you think Dabo Swinney will come out? Do you think, they're going to be looking into the things that are important for the 2022-2023 Falcons and not just this year.
In 2018, when the Packers fired Mike McCarthy with several games left, I think that helped crystallize this idea that it's in everyone's interest once the team makes the decision. It's not disrespectful to the coach. If anything, right. It's extra respectful. You're not working behind his back. You're not holding him in place for the next 4 weeks in a task he can't win at. He's still getting fired when it's all said and done. Let him embark on his next step. Let him take the next 4 weeks to decompress so he can make some good plans about what he wants to do for the future, instead of telling him he's fired as soon as he reaches the end of the marathon that is an NFL season. So I think more and more teams are realizing it, and they're doing it earlier. And it started with the Texans. It continued with the Falcons. And it makes me wonder, will other owners be more likely to follow suit? Is that the copycat trend this year, where we see multiple additional interim coaches on top of the ones we've already seen? In Atlanta, a bit of a surprise that it wasn't just the coach, Dan Quinn. It was also longtime GM Thomas Dimitroff. He was hired way back in 2008. He appeared on Brother from Another yesterday and was asked, among other things, did he see his own firing coming?
We were in a spot, unfortunately, with 2 losing seasons and going into an 0-5 that all bets were off. Quite honestly, it just depended on how it was going to play out. And in the end, Mr. Blank decided that it was best to go with both the head coach and the general manager at one time and focus on moving forward. So again, never going to be easy in that situation, but appreciate my 13 years there and know that there's going to be some really interesting beginnings and new journeys, which I've always been really excited about. I'm not just a myopic football person necessarily. There's a lot in my life and a lot of layers that I'm looking forward to digging into.
Doesn't necessarily sound like he wants to jump right in as a general manager. And Peter, the dynamic in the NFL has been coaches will often get a second bite at the apple. General managers, for the most part, you get one shot. Now, right. Dave Gettleman ended up getting another opportunity. And there are others that have gotten second opportunities. But for the most part, those are few and far between. It always seems like when a team's looking for a general manager, it goes to the less experienced, up-and-coming scout who's using all the new tricks of the trade, who grew up in a different environment. Yeah, instead of somebody who's done it before. And that's just kind of the way it is. And so I would bet against a door opening somewhere else for Thomas Dimitroff right away, just because that's not how it works.
Joe Douglas, Chris Ballard, Andrew Berry. To me, I think when you look at guys who get GM jobs, here is the way that the average owner will think of this. Number one, what team in the league is winning right now? Why do you think that the Patriots have been a great little GM tree for so many teams. You know, you look at the Lions, and you go back and look at the Chiefs taking Scott Pioli in 2009, I think it was. And you go back and you look and you basically say GMs get jobs from winning programs, and when they have stories that are like, you know, Joe Douglas was the key guy in the Ravens organization to say, listen, just wait, you can get Joe Flacco in the middle of the first round or maybe even later, and he's going to be our guy. And although Flacco turned out to have a bit of a short shelf life, I mean, he won a Super Bowl. And so, and played very, very well in that playoff run in that Super Bowl. So I know a lot of people were sort of, you know, down on Flacco near the end and are down on him now, but forget that. If you're drafted, I think he was 18th overall, and you win a Super Bowl for the team that drafts you, throw a parade. That's a great draft choice. So, and Joe Douglas was primarily responsible for that. When you work for Ozzie Newsome, Eric DeCosta, and then you go and work for Philadelphia, Howie Roseman and that personnel staff, and have a lot of experience with a guy with smart people, that's what owners want. So, and I'm not saying that's the only way to get a GM job, but that's where the questions really start, with the really good programs with guys who've got a good pedigree.
And one of the other realities, too, that complicates the general manager hire, if the coach is in charge of everything, sometimes you have to go outside the box to hire a GM. You can't just go and hire the up-and-coming director of player personnel from another team, because unless you're giving that guy final say in some respect of the draft, the roster, whatever, his current team can say no. And that's why John Lynch ended up with the 49ers, where Kyle Shanahan runs the show. That's why Mike Mayock ended up with the Raiders, where John Gruden runs the show. It's one of the reasons why. Because you can't just go to another team and say, we want that guy who's the next potential GM candidate, because if you're not going to let him be a true GM, you're not going to get him away from the team that currently has him. So a bunch of factors, a bunch of issues, but I don't know what Thomas is going to do. I respect the hell out of the fact that he survived there from 2008 until now. There were other times.
And Mike, remember two things. Remember two things about Dimitroff. And I know people are down lately on his drafts and some of his free agent signings. I get that. And some of them deserve to be criticized. But remember two things. He resisted all sorts of entreaties back in 2008. I was in their draft, at their draft that weekend, and I will never forget, he had multiple chances to trade out of the pick that became Matt Ryan, including a very serious, offer from the Ravens. You know, later in that round, they ended up taking Flacco. But early in that draft, they were contenders to move up to try to get Matt Ryan. But what I was going to say is, there's that, and then the real gutsy trade way up to get Julio Jones. So to me, to my way of thinking, you know, when you talk about the two most important players in that franchise over the last decade, you know, are Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, and Thomas Dimitroff worked to make both of those picks happen and to make both of those picks right. So I understand that everybody is ticked off that they're 5 under 500 since they were in the Super Bowl. That's not good. But let's just remember that the body of work is pretty good with Thomas Dimitroff.
And remember, he contacted Bill Belichick for his advice before pulling the trigger on the trade up to get Julio Jones, and Belichick told him, don't do it. And he did it anyway.
That's right.
Gutsy move by Thomas Dimitroff.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.